Do you really not recognize me? William Carter didn't answer right away. For a moment, he simply looked at her. Then, without hesitation, no, the word came out calm. Certain. Who are you? He asked, his voice controlled, precise. And why are you standing in front of my house this late at night, thinking I'm someone you know? My mom's name is Lena, she said softly. And I'm Annie. William's brow tightened. You're my uncle, she continued. You're my mom's brother. The words landed, but they didn't settle. I think you're mistaken, William said. Annie shook her head quickly. No, she whispered. I remember you. That made him pause. She lifted the photograph slightly, hesitating for just a second. Then she stepped forward and held it out to him. Please, look. William hesitated but took it. The paper felt thin, old, handled too many times. He turned it toward the light, and everything shifted. There he was, younger, less guarded, standing in a place far removed from the life he now lived, and beside him, a woman, dark-skinned, smiling, familiar in a way that struck deeper than recognition. Lena. William's breath slowed. He hadn't said her name out loud in years. You kept this? He murmured, more to himself than to her. My mom did, Annie said. She said if I ever needed help, I should find you. William stared at the photograph a moment longer, then lowered it slightly, his gaze returning to the girl. Something inside him had shifted, but not enough. I've been looking for you, he said suddenly. The words surprised even him. Annie blinked. For 2 years, William continued, his voice tightening just slightly. After I came to see your mother, I tried to find that apartment again. You were gone. That part was true. He had gone back once, then twice, and then less and less, until eventually, not at all. They said the tenants moved out, he added. No forwarding address, no records. Annie's fingers curled in the hem of her sleeve. We had to leave, she said quietly. William's eyes stayed on her. Why? She hesitated, then answered in the simplest way she could. My mom lost her job, Annie said. We couldn't pay rent. We moved. A lot. We stayed with people sometimes, she continued. Sometimes we didn't. William felt something tighten in his chest. And now? He asked. Annie looked down briefly, then back up at him. My mom is sick, she said. She's been sick for a while, Annie added, but it got worse. She can't work anymore. She shifted her weight slightly, as if the ground beneath her wasn't entirely steady. We don't have money, she said. Not for doctors, not for medicine. My mom told me where to find you, Annie said. She remembered the name. She wrote it down for me. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper, worn, creased, nearly torn at the edges. I followed it, she said. I asked people. I walked. William looked at the paper, then at her. You came here, alone? He asked. Annie nodded. I didn't know where else to go. Silence stretched between them. In front of him, a child carrying a piece of a life he had left unfinished. I thought maybe... Annie hesitated, her voice softening. Maybe you'd remember me. William looked down at the photograph again, at the man he used to be, at the sister he hadn't protected, at the promise he hadn't kept. Then he looked back at Annie, and for the first time, he didn't see a stranger. He saw consequence. Where is she? He asked. This time, there was no distance left in his voice. What happens if I tell you? She asked. William exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening just enough to show the effort it took to keep his voice steady. It means I go there, he said. Now. Annie blinked, as if the answer had come faster than she expected. You won't call anyone? She asked. Not yet. You won't send someone else? William shook his head. No, that seemed to matter, more than anything else so far. Annie nodded once, almost to herself, then unfolded the small piece of paper in her hands. The creases were deep, the ink slightly smudged in places, as if it had been folded and unfolded too many times to count. She held it out to him. William took it. An address. Short. Incomplete. The kind that only made sense if you already knew where to look. He recognized the area immediately. Is this where you live? He asked. Annie nodded. For now. The words were too practiced. William glanced toward the driver, who had stepped out of the front seat but remained respectfully distant. Get the car ready, William said. The driver didn't ask questions. He simply nodded and moved. The guard hesitated near the gate. "Sir, should we notify?" "No," William repeated, sharper this time. William looked back down at Annie. She was still waiting, as if this could still disappear, as if he could still change his mind. "We're going," he said. Only then did something in her shoulders shift. The car door opened with a soft click. William gestured slightly. "Get in." Annie hesitated just long enough to show she wasn't used to being invited into places like this. Then she climbed in, carefully, as if she might break something just by touching it. William followed, closing the door behind him. Annie sat stiffly near the edge of the seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes moving quickly over everything, the leather, the lights, the small details that marked a world she had never been part of. She didn't touch anything, didn't lean back, didn't ask questions. The car began to move. At first, neither of them spoke. The estate gates opened slowly behind them, the iron bars sliding apart with a low mechanical hum. And just like that, "You walked here?" William asked after a few minutes. Annie nodded. "I took a bus first," she said. "Then I walked." "How long?" She shrugged slightly. "I don't know." "A while." William studied her for a moment. "You didn't get lost?" "I almost did," she admitted. "But I asked people." "What people?" She glanced out the window. "Anyone who didn't look too busy." That answer stayed with him longer than it should have. The car moved deeper into the city, the clean lines of suburban order giving way to something more crowded, more worn. Streetlights flickered, buildings grew closer together. Storefronts changed, less polished, more practical. Some were closed, some never seemed to open. Annie shifted slightly in her seat, her eyes following the passing streets with quiet recognition. "You've been here before," William said. "Yes." Her voice softened. "This is closer." William leaned back slightly, his gaze moving out the window. He had seen places like this before. "My mom didn't want me to come alone," Annie said suddenly. William looked at her. "She said to wait," Annie continued. "She said maybe it would get better." A small pause. "It didn't. If this moment touched you, take a second to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments where you are watching from. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more." The words were simple, but they carried something heavier than frustration. "What kind of sick?" William asked. Annie hesitated. "I don't know the word," she said. "She coughs a lot. And sometimes she can't breathe right." William's expression tightened slightly. "How long has it been like that?" "A while." "How long is a while?" Annie thought about it. "Since winter," she said. William looked away. Winter had been months ago. The car turned onto a narrower street, then another. The pavement grew uneven, the buildings older, the lights fewer. Annie leaned forward slightly. "It's coming up," she said. The driver slowed. "Where?" William asked. "There." Annie pointed. It wasn't a building, more like what was left of one. Paint peeling, windows dim, a single light flickering somewhere inside. The car came to a stop. For a moment, no one moved. William stared at the structure in front of him. This was where she lived. This was where Lena had been all this time. Annie reached for the door. William's hand moved instinctively. "Wait, I should have found you," he said quietly. The words surprised him. Annie didn't respond right away. Then, softly, "You're here now." It wasn't forgiveness. Not exactly, but it was something close enough to matter. William nodded once, then opened the door. The night air hit colder here, sharper, less forgiving. He stepped out, then turned back toward Annie. "You stay close to me," he said. She nodded. "I will." The hallway smelled faintly of damp wood and something older like air that hadn't moved in years. William stepped inside first, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. The ceiling light flickered once, then steadied into a weak yellow glow that barely reached the corners of the narrow corridor. The walls were scuffed, paint peeling in thin curls near the baseboards. Somewhere deeper inside, a pipe rattled softly, then fell quiet again. Behind him, Annie stepped in without hesitation. This was her world. She didn't pause to look around, didn't react to the cold or the silence. She simply moved forward, her small hand brushing lightly against the wall as if following something familiar in the dark. "This way," she said. William closed the door behind them. The sound echoed more than it should have. He followed her down the hallway, each step slower than the last, not because he was unsure of where to go, but because something about this place resisted him. Not physically, emotionally, like it didn't belong to him, like he didn't belong in it. They reached a door near the end. Annie didn't knock. She pushed it open. The room inside was small, too small for what it held. A single bed pushed against the wall. A chair beside it. A table cluttered with medicine bottles, some empty, some half-used, none organized in any way that suggested proper care. And on the bed, Lena. William stopped, not abruptly, not dramatically, just completely. She looked smaller than he remembered, thinner. Her skin carried a dullness that no amount of rest could fix. Her hair, once full and alive, now lay loosely around her shoulders, strands clinging to her face as if even gravity had become too much. For a moment, she didn't move. Then her eyes opened, slowly, and found him. There was no confusion in them, no surprise, just a quiet recognition that settled almost immediately. "You made it," she said, her voice rough, barely above a breath. William didn't answer right away. He stepped forward instead, one step, then another, until he stood at the edge of the bed, looking down at someone he had once known well enough to call family, and then had chosen not to. He started, but the word didn't finish, because nothing he could say would fit into this moment. Lena watched him, her gaze steady despite the exhaustion written across her face. "You look the same," she murmured faintly. "Just more expensive." It wasn't a joke, not really, but there was something in her tone that reminded him of who she used to be. William let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh but didn't quite reach it. "You don't," he said quietly. Lena smiled, just slightly. "I figured." A silence followed, heavy, not with anger, but with everything that had never been said. Annie moved closer to the bed, climbing up just enough to sit beside her mother without disturbing her too much. "I found him," she said softly. Lena's eyes shifted briefly to Annie, then back to William. "I knew you would," she whispered. William's hands moved slightly at his sides, uncertain, unpracticed in a space like this. "What happened?" he asked. The question sounded too simple. "Too late." Lena exhaled slowly. "Life," she said. A small pause. "Turns out it doesn't get easier just because you expect it to." William glanced at the table beside the bed, picking up one of the bottles. The label was faded. The prescription date was months old. "This isn't being managed," he said. "No," Lena replied. "Why didn't you go to a hospital?" She gave a faint, tired smile. "With what money?" William's jaw tightened. "You could have called you?" She finished for him. There was no accusation in her voice. That made it worse. "I didn't have your number," she added. "And even if I did, I wasn't sure you'd answer." The words landed quietly, but they stayed. William set the bottle back down. "I came back," he said. "After that day, I tried to find you." "I know," Lena said. He looked at her. "You..." "No." She nodded faintly. "The landlord mentioned it," she said. "Said some man in a suit came by asking questions." A small breath. We had already left. William looked away. Of course they had. Timing had never been his strength when it came to things that mattered. "I should have kept looking," he said. "Yes," Lena replied. Not harsh, not forgiving, just true. The room fell quiet again. Annie's small hand slipped into her mother's, holding it gently, carefully, as if she had learned exactly how much pressure it could take. "She got worse," Annie said softly, looking at William now. "I tried to help." William nodded once. "I can see that." His gaze moved back to Lena. "How long have you been like this?" Lena hesitated. "Long enough," she said. "That's not an answer. It's the one I have." William exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. The air in the room felt too still, too heavy, like it had been waiting for something to change and didn't know how. "Can you stand?" he asked. Lena let out a faint breath that almost sounded like amusement. "That's ambitious. I'm serious." "I know," she said. "That's what makes it funny." William didn't smile. Instead, he stepped closer. "We're going to a hospital," he said. Lena's eyes shifted slightly. "No." The word was quiet, but firm. William stilled. "That's not optional. It is for me." Annie looked between them, her grip tightening slightly. "Mom, I'm not leaving like this," Lena said, her voice gaining just enough strength to hold its ground. "I don't have insurance. I don't have... You have me." William cut in. The words came sharper than intended, but they didn't take them back. Lena stared at him, longer this time, as if trying to decide whether that sentence meant anything at all. That didn't help much last time, she said quietly. William didn't flinch. He absorbed it. Because she wasn't wrong. I'm here now, he said. Not defensive, not apologetic, just present. Another silence. Then Annie spoke, her voice small but steady. Please. That was all. One word. But it carried everything neither adult could say properly. Lena closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, something in her resistance had shifted. Not gone, but softened. I don't want her to see me like this, she said. William glanced at Annie. She already does, he replied gently. That settled it. Lena exhaled slowly. Then, after a moment, help me sit up. William moved immediately. Careful, deliberate. As if he understood, finally, that this wasn't something he could rush. That every second mattered now. Not for business, not for control, but for something far simpler. For someone he should have never left behind. And someone who had come back for him anyway. Lena's weight was lighter than William expected. That was the first thing that unsettled him. When he helped her sit up, carefully sliding one arm behind her shoulders, the other steadying her arm, there was almost nothing there to hold. Not in the way a person should be. Not in the way someone who had once stood strong, defiant, and unshaken in the face of being left behind should feel. She winced slightly as she moved, her breath catching halfway through the motion. Easy, William murmured, his voice lower now, instinctively gentler. I'm fine, Lena whispered. She wasn't. They all knew it, but no one said it out loud. Annie shifted closer on the bed, her small hand still wrapped around her mother's. She didn't try to help physically, she had already learned where her strength ended, but her presence never wavered. I've got you, William said. The words came naturally this time, not rehearsed, not distant, real. Lena glanced at him briefly, something unreadable passing through her expression. Careful, she said faintly. You're starting to sound like you mean that. William didn't respond. Because he did, that was the problem. Once Lena was sitting upright, the room seemed to shift around them. Not brighter, not better, just more urgent. As if standing still any longer would make everything worse. We need to move, William said. Lena nodded once, though even that small motion seemed to cost her. Annie slipped off the bed and quickly reached for a thin sweater hanging on the back of the chair. She'll get cold, Annie said, holding it up. William took it from her without hesitation and helped Lena into it, careful not to pull too hard, careful not to rush. Every movement felt deliberate now, measured, as if the wrong move might undo something fragile. Shoes? He asked. Annie moved again, this time toward a corner where a pair of worn sneakers sat beside the wall. They're here, she said. William knelt slightly, something he hadn't done in years for anyone, and helped Lena slide her feet into them. The laces were frayed, uneven, but he tied them anyway, tightening them just enough to hold. For a brief second, his hands paused. A memory brushed against him, distant but sharp. Tying his own shoes before school. Someone watching. Someone who never had the same pair twice. He pushed the thought away. Not now. Can you stand? He asked again. Lena gave a faint, humorless smile. Let's find out. With Annie on one side and William on the other, they helped her to her feet. Her knees buckled slightly. William tightened his grip instantly. I've got you, he repeated. This time, Lena didn't comment. She just nodded. That was enough. The hallway felt longer on the way out. Not physically, emotionally. Each step Lena took was slow, uneven, her breathing shallow and inconsistent. Annie stayed close, watching every movement as if memorizing it, ready to react if anything went wrong. William adjusted his pace without thinking. For once, nothing about this moment could be rushed. When they reached the door, Annie pushed it open first. The night air hit them immediately. Cooler, sharper, cleaner than the air inside but not kinder. William guided Lena carefully down the short steps, his grip firm but controlled. The driver had already stepped out of the car, moving quickly toward them. His usual composure replaced by something more alert. Sir, open the back, William said. No explanation, no delay. The driver nodded and moved. The car door opened wide. William helped Lena inside first, supporting her as she lowered herself onto the seat. Annie climbed in beside her immediately, pressing close, her small hand finding her mother's again without hesitation. William followed, closing the door behind them. "Hospital," he said. The driver didn't ask which one. He already knew. The car pulled away from the curb. This time, faster, more urgent. Inside, the silence felt different. Not empty, tense, alive with everything that hadn't been said. Lena leaned back slightly, her head resting against the seat, her eyes half closed. Annie watched her closely. "Stay awake," she whispered. Lena gave the smallest of smiles. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, but her voice didn't quite support the promise. William reached forward, pressing a button on the panel. "Call ahead," he instructed. "Tell them we're 10 minutes out. I want a team ready." "Yes, sir." His tone had changed. It wasn't the cold authority from before. It was sharper now, focused, directed. This was the world he knew, the one where things moved because he said they should. But this time, it wasn't about business. William glanced at Lena, at the way her breathing stuttered between steady and strained, at the way Annie leaned into her, as if trying to hold her in place just by staying close. "How long since she's eaten?" he asked. Annie hesitated. "A little yesterday," she said. "What about today?" Annie shook her head. William's jaw tightened. He reached for a bottle of water from the compartment and handed it over. "Small sips," he said. Annie nodded and helped Lena take a little, careful not to rush her. "Thank you," Lena murmured faintly. William didn't respond with words. He simply watched. For the first time in years, he was paying attention to something that couldn't be solved with distance. The city lights passed by outside the window, flickering across the glass like fragments of a world he had always moved through without truly seeing. "Until now. My mom said you'd help," Annie said quietly. William looked at her. "She said you weren't a bad person," Annie continued. "Just busy." The word lingered. Busy. Such a simple excuse. Such a dangerous one. William exhaled slowly. "Sometimes," he said, his voice low, "people use being busy to avoid things they don't want to face." Annie frowned slightly, trying to understand. "Like what?" William looked at Lena, then back at Annie. "Like responsibility." The car turned sharply, accelerating as the hospital came into view ahead. Bright lights, wide doors, a place built for urgency. For moments like this, Lena's fingers tightened weakly around Annie's. "Hey," Annie whispered. "We're here." The car slowed, then stopped. Before the driver could even step out, William was already opening the door. He's coming," he said, and for the first time, it sounded like a promise he intended to keep. The hospital doors slid open before they even reached them. Bright white light spilled outward, cutting through the night like something sterile and unforgiving. It erased shadows. It erased hesitation. William stepped forward first, his hand already raised in a signal he didn't need to explain. "They're here," someone said. Two nurses moved quickly, pushing a gurney into position. A doctor followed. Mid. 40S. Focused. Already assessing before a single question was asked. "What do we have?" the doctor said. "Female. Mid-30s. William answered, his voice steady, controlled. "Severe respiratory distress, prolonged without treatment. Limited intake. Unknown full history." The doctor nodded once. "Let's move." They transferred Lena carefully. She barely reacted. Her eyes half open, her breathing shallow and uneven. Annie stepped back just enough to let them work, but her hand didn't leave her mother's until the last possible second. "Mom," Lena's fingers tightened faintly in response. "I'm right here," Annie whispered. William stood close behind her, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder, not guiding, not holding. Just there. The gurney moved fast, down the hallway, into the light. "Sir, we'll need you to wait here," one of the nurses said as they reached a set of double doors. William nodded once. He knew this part. He had been here before, different circumstances. Same door, same feeling. The doors swung shut, and just like that, they were on the outside. Annie stood still for a moment, staring at the closed doors as if they might open again if she didn't look away. "They're going to help her," William said quietly. Annie didn't answer, not right away. Then, "They have to," she whispered. It wasn't hope, it was necessity. William guided her gently toward a row of chairs along the wall. "Sit," he said. She obeyed, climbing onto the edge of the chair, her feet not quite touching the floor, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Still, controlled, too controlled. William sat beside her, leaving just enough space not to overwhelm, but close enough that she wouldn't feel alone. For a while, neither of them spoke. The hospital moved around them, footsteps, distant voices, the soft beeping of machines echoing through the corridors. Life happening, indifferently. After a few minutes, Annie spoke. Are they going to ask for money? The question came out quiet. Careful. William turned his head slightly toward her. No, he said. Annie looked at him. They always do, she said, not accusing, just stating a fact she had learned. William shook his head. Not tonight. She studied him for a moment. Because of you? Yes. Another pause. Is that okay? She asked. William exhaled slowly. Yes, he said again. It's okay. Annie nodded once, as if accepting that answer for now. Then she looked back at the doors. I tried to help her, she said softly. William didn't interrupt. I made her soup once, Annie continued. But I think I burned it. She still ate it. A small pause. She said it was good. William felt something tighten in his chest. I believe her, he said. Annie gave the faintest hint of a smile. She lies when she wants me to feel better, she said. That's not lying, William replied quietly. That's protecting. Annie considered that, then nodded. Minutes passed, then more. Time in hospitals didn't move normally. It stretched, folded, waited. A doctor finally stepped through the doors. Not the same one. Younger, tired. Family of Lena Carter? The name landed between them. Annie looked up immediately. William stood. Yes. The doctor glanced between them, quickly assessing. She's stable for now, he said. We're running tests. Severe infection. Likely pneumonia that's gone untreated for too long. She's dehydrated. Malnourished. Each word came clinical. Precise. Heavy. But she's responding, the doctor added. That's good. Annie let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Can we see her? She asked. Soon, the doctor said. We need to get her settled first. He turned slightly to William. Are you the next of kin? William didn't hesitate. Yes. The answer came before he could question it, before he could weigh it. It was simply true. Then we'll need some paperwork, the doctor said. Take care of it, William replied. The doctor nodded and stepped away. Silence returned, but it felt different now. Not as heavy, not as uncertain. Annie leaned back slightly in her chair, her shoulders loosening for the first time since they had arrived. She's okay, she whispered. William looked at her. She's not okay yet, he said gently. But she's going to be. Annie nodded. That was enough. A nurse approached quietly, carrying a small cup and a wrapped sandwich. For you, she said, offering it to Annie. Annie hesitated, then looked at William. He gave a small nod. It's okay. She took it carefully. Thank you, she said. The nurse smiled and walked away. Annie unwrapped the sandwich slowly, as if unsure whether it was really meant for her. She took a small bite, then another, hungrier now. William watched quietly. When was the last time you ate? He asked. Annie thought. I don't remember, she said. That answer stayed with him. He leaned back slightly in his chair, his gaze drifting toward the closed doors again. The same doors. Always the same doors. But this time, he wasn't waiting alone. Annie finished half the sandwich, then stopped. You can eat the rest later, William said. She nodded and wrapped it back up carefully. Can I ask you something? She said after a moment. Yes. She looked at him directly. Why didn't you come back? The question was simple, but it didn't leave room for easy answers. William didn't respond immediately. He could have said he tried. He could have said he didn't know where to look. He could have said a lot of things. Instead, I told myself I did enough, he said quietly. Annie frowned slightly. Was it true? William looked at the floor for a moment, then back at her. No, Annie nodded, not judging, just understanding. Another silence passed. Then, you came now, she said. William exhaled slowly. Yes. She leaned back slightly, her head resting against the chair. That counts, she murmured. William didn't know if it did, but for her, it seemed to be enough. And for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe that maybe it could be. The hallway outside Lena's room was quieter now, not silent but softened, the kind of quiet that only came after something urgent had been pulled back from the edge. William stood near the window at the far end of the corridor, his hands resting loosely in his coat pockets. The glass reflected his image faintly, layered over the dim city lights beyond. For a moment, he watched that reflection instead of the world outside. It looked like him, but it didn't feel like him. Behind him, Annie sat in a chair just outside Lena's room, her legs tucked slightly beneath her, the wrapped half of her sandwich still resting carefully in her lap. She hadn't touched it again, not because she wasn't hungry, but because she was waiting. Waiting had become something she was good at. A nurse passed by, offering a quiet smile as she checked the chart on the door before slipping inside. The door didn't close completely this time. It stayed slightly open. An invitation, or maybe a test. William turned back. "You can go in," he said. Annie looked up quickly, almost as if she hadn't expected to hear it. "Really?" He nodded. "She'll want to see you." That was all it took. Annie slid off the chair and moved toward the door, her steps careful, almost reverent, like entering the room required permission even after everything that had happened. William followed but stopped just outside. Not out of hesitation, out of instinct. The room was brighter than the hallway, but softer than the emergency ward. Machines hummed quietly. A monitor traced Lena's heartbeat in steady, reassuring lines. Lena lay propped slightly upright now, an oxygen tube resting beneath her nose. Her skin still carried the pale exhaustion from before, but there was something different in her breathing. More even, more present. Her eyes shifted as Annie stepped closer. "Hey," Lena whispered. Annie didn't speak right away. She climbed gently onto the edge of the bed, careful not to disturb anything, and reached for her mother's hand. "You scared me," she said finally. Lena's lips curved faintly. "I scare easily these days," she murmured. Annie shook her head. "That wasn't funny." "I know." The apology was quiet, real. Annie tightened her grip slightly, as if confirming something. "You're staying?" she asked. "For a while," Lena said. Annie nodded, accepting that answer for what it was. William remained by the door, watching, not intruding, but not leaving either. Lena's gaze drifted toward him after a moment. "You're still here," she said. William gave a small nod. "I said I would be." Lena studied him for a second longer than necessary. "People say a lot of things," she replied. William didn't argue. He stepped into the room slowly instead. "I signed the papers," he said. "They're continuing treatment. Whatever you need, it's covered." Lena let out a slow breath, her eyes closing briefly as if the weight of that sentence alone required energy to process. "You always did like solving things with money," she said. William didn't react immediately. Then, "It's not solving anything," he said quietly. "It's just removing one problem." Lena opened her eyes again, looking at him more carefully this time. "That's new," she said. "What is?" "Admitting that money doesn't fix everything." William held her gaze. "It doesn't fix what I didn't do." The room fell still. Annie looked between them, not fully understanding but feeling the shift in tone. Lena didn't respond right away. She turned her head slightly toward Annie instead. "Did you eat?" she asked. Annie nodded. "A sandwich. Good." A pause. "You need to eat more than that." "I will." Lena's fingers moved faintly in Annie's hand. "You always say that." Annie gave a small, almost shy smile. "Because it works." Lena smiled back, then winced slightly. The movement cost her. William noticed immediately. "You need to rest," he said. Lena didn't argue. That was new too. The nurse stepped back into the room quietly, checking the IV, adjusting something on the monitor. "She needs sleep," the nurse said gently. "Short visits for now." Annie looked reluctant, but she nodded. "I'll be right outside," she told her mother. Lena squeezed her hand once. "I know." Annie slipped off the bed and walked toward the door. William stepped aside to let her pass. But before she left completely, Lena spoke again. "William." He turned back. She was looking at him directly now, clearer than before, more present. "Don't disappear this time," she said. There was no anger in it, no accusation, just a quiet statement, a boundary. William held her gaze. "I won't." Lena studied him for a moment, as if deciding whether that answer belonged to the past or the present. Then she closed her eyes, not in dismissal, in acceptance. The nurse dimmed the lights slightly. William stepped out into the hallway. Annie was already back in her chair, her posture straighter now, less tense. "She's better," Annie said as soon as he approached. "She is," William replied. Annie looked down at her hands for a moment, then back up at him. "Are we staying here tonight?" William glanced down the corridor. At the doors. At the quiet. Yes, he said. Annie nodded. Okay. A small pause. Then, can I sit closer to the door? William looked at her. Why? So, I can hear if she needs something. The answer was immediate. Instinctive. William hesitated. Then he moved his chair closer to the door. Then I'll sit here too, he said. Annie blinked. You don't have to. I know. He sat down anyway. The hallway settled around them again. But this time, it didn't feel as empty. Annie leaned back slightly, her head resting against the wall. You really stayed, she said quietly. William looked ahead. At the door, at the thin line of light spilling through it. Yes, he said. Annie closed her eyes slowly. Not asleep, just resting. And for the first time since she had stood at his gate, she didn't look like she was waiting for something to go wrong. The night stretched longer than either of them expected. Hospitals had a way of bending time, minutes slipping into hours without warning. The steady hum of machines replacing any real sense of movement. Outside the narrow window at the end of the hallway, the city had gone quiet. Even the traffic had thinned, leaving behind only the occasional flicker of headlights passing in the distance. William hadn't moved. Not really. He sat in the same chair beside Annie. His posture relaxed but alert, as if leaving even for a moment might undo something important. Annie had drifted in and out of sleep, her head tilting slightly to one side, then correcting itself as she forced her eyes open again. You can sleep, William said quietly. She shook her head without fully lifting it. I don't want to miss anything. You won't. She didn't argue, but she didn't close her eyes either. After a moment, William stood. I'll be right back, he said. Annie's eyes opened immediately. Where are you going? Just down the hall, he replied. Coffee. Maybe something for you to eat. I'm okay, she said automatically. William gave her a look. Not stern. Just knowing. I'll bring something anyway. She hesitated, then nodded once. Okay. William walked down the corridor, his footsteps quiet against the polished floor. The vending machines near the waiting area glowed faintly, offering the same options they always did: simple, predictable, impersonal. He stood there for a moment, longer than necessary, staring at the rows of packaged food. When was the last time he had done something this ordinary? He couldn't remember. He bought two things anyway: another sandwich, a small carton of juice, and a cup of coffee that was more habit than need. On his way back, he passed a nurse reviewing a chart. How is she? William asked. The nurse looked up. Stronger than when she came in, she said. That's a good sign. But, he pressed. The nurse gave a small, understanding look. She waited too long, she said. Recovery won't be quick. William nodded. I'm not in a hurry. The nurse smiled faintly. That's good. She'll need time. William continued down the hall, the words settling deeper than he expected. Time. The one thing he had always had, and never used properly. When he returned, Annie was exactly where he left her, but her posture had changed. She was leaning slightly forward now, her eyes fixed on the door. Did something happen? William asked immediately. Annie shook her head. No, I just heard her move. William set the food down beside her. That's a good thing, he said. Annie nodded, then glanced at the sandwich. You brought another one? Yes. She looked at it for a moment, then picked it up. Thank you. William sat back down beside her. This time, she didn't hesitate. She ate slowly at first, then faster, not rushing but no longer holding back. William didn't comment. He just watched quietly, making a mental note of how easily hunger hid itself in children who were used to having it. Halfway through, Annie stopped. You're not eating, she said. I'm fine. She frowned slightly. That's what my mom says when she's not. William almost smiled. Then I'll eat later, he said. Annie studied him for a second longer, then nodded, accepting it. The hallway grew quieter, the kind of quiet that came just before morning. After a while, Annie spoke again. Can I ask you something? William turned slightly toward her. Yes. She hesitated. Then, why didn't my mom ever come here before? The question was careful, not accusing, just searching. William exhaled slowly. Because places like this don't always feel like they're meant for everyone, he said. Annie frowned. But they are. They should be, William corrected gently. She thought about that, then nodded. My mom said hospitals are for people who can afford to be sick, she added quietly. William looked at her. That's not how it's supposed to work. But it does, Annie said. There was no bitterness in her voice, just observation. William didn't argue, because she wasn't wrong. After a moment, Annie leaned back again, her head resting lightly against his arm this time without asking. William stilled for half a second, then let it happen. No correction, no distance, just presence. Are you going to leave? She asked softly. The question came out differently this time. Not urgent, not afraid, just needing to know. William looked straight ahead, at the door, at the faint light still glowing beneath it. No, he said. Annie didn't respond right away. Then, okay, that was all. But it carried more trust than anything else she had given him so far. Minutes passed, then longer. The sky outside the window began to shift, the deep black softening into a faint gray. Morning. Slow, uncertain, but coming. A doctor stepped out of Lena's room. Not hurried this time, measured. William stood immediately. How is she? The doctor glanced at his chart. She's resting, he said. Vitals are improving. We'll keep her under observation, but she made it through the worst of the night. William nodded once. Thank you. The doctor gave a small smile. Thank her, he said. She's stronger than she looks. He moved on. William sat back down. Annie was watching him. She's okay? She asked. She's going to be, he said. Annie let out a breath. Then, without thinking, she reached for his hand. Small, warm, certain. William didn't pull away. Outside, the first light of morning touched the edge of the city, and for the first time in a long time, something in William Carter's life felt like it wasn't slipping away. It was beginning. Morning didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly through the narrow window at the end of the hallway, across the polished floor, softening the edges of everything it touched. The harshness of the night before began to fade, replaced by something quieter. Not relief. Not yet, but something close to it. Annie stirred first. Her head had slipped fully against William's arm at some point during the early hours, her small hand still loosely wrapped around his. When she opened her eyes, she didn't move right away. She just blinked, adjusting to the light, as if making sure the world she woke up to was still the same one she had fallen asleep in. You stayed, she murmured. William glanced down at her. I said I would. Annie pushed herself upright slowly, rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand. For a moment, she looked younger than she had the entire night before. Just a child, not someone who had crossed a city alone, not someone who had learned how to wait in silence. Can we see her now? She asked. William looked toward the door. The light beneath it was still on. Let's check, he said. They both stood. This time, Annie didn't hesitate. She reached for his hand first. William noticed, but didn't comment. He simply held on. They stepped into the room together. Lena was awake, not fully, not strong, but awake. Her eyes shifted toward the door as it opened, and when she saw Annie, something in her expression softened immediately. Hey, Lena whispered. Annie moved quickly to her side. I'm here, she said, climbing carefully onto the chair beside the bed. I didn't go anywhere. I know, Lena replied. Her voice was still weak, but steadier than before. That alone was enough to change the room. William stayed a few steps back at first, watching, measuring. Not because he didn't belong, but because he wasn't used to belonging in moments like this. How do you feel? Annie asked. Lena gave a faint smile, like I got into a fight with something invisible. And lost. Annie frowned. You didn't lose. Lena looked at her. No? No, Annie said firmly. You're still here. That settled it. Lena's smile deepened slightly, though it cost her. Then I guess I didn't. William stepped closer. Doctor says you'll be here a few days, he said. They want to monitor you. Lena glanced at him. Few days sounds expensive. It's handled. Of course it is. There was no bite in her tone, just acknowledgement. William didn't push further. Instead, he reached for the chart at the end of the bed, scanning it briefly not because he needed to understand every detail, but because it gave him something to do with the weight of being there. Annie watched both of them. Then quietly, Are we staying here too? William looked at her. Yes. For how long? As long as it takes. Annie nodded. That answer made sense to her. Time, to her, had never been measured in schedules, only in what was needed. A nurse stepped in a moment later, smiling softly as she checked the monitors. Good morning, she said. Looks like we have a little more life in here today. Lena gave a faint nod. Working on it. The nurse turned to Annie. And you must be the reason. Annie hesitated. Then, maybe, she said. The nurse smiled. Maybe is enough. She adjusted the IV, checked Lena's pulse, then stepped back. We'll have a doctor come by soon, she added. But for now, rest. When she left, the room felt quieter again, but not empty. Different. William leaned slightly against the wall, his arms folding loosely, not closed off, just grounded. Annie looked at him. Do you have to go to work today? She asked. The question caught him off guard. Work. For a second, it felt like something from another life. No, he said. Annie blinked. You don't? No. Why? William considered the question, then answered simply, because I'm needed here. Annie studied him for a moment, then nodded. That makes sense. Lena watched the exchange quietly. You always had a schedule, she said to William. Even when you didn't need one. William gave a small, almost self-aware exhale. Schedules are easier than people. Lena raised an eyebrow faintly. And now? William glanced at Annie, then back at her. Now I'm trying something harder. Lena didn't respond, but something in her expression shifted. Not fully trust. Not yet, but something that leaned in that direction. Annie slid off the chair and moved closer to William. Can we get her something? She asked quietly. Like real food? William looked at Lena. The question mattered. Doctor will decide, he said. But we'll ask. Annie nodded, satisfied. Then she did something small but new. She reached for William's hand again, not out of fear, not out of uncertainty. Just naturally, as if it belonged there now. William looked down at her hand in his, then back up, and didn't let go. Outside, the morning had fully arrived. Light filled the room now, not harsh, not overwhelming, just enough to make everything visible, clear, honest, and for the first time, there was nothing in this room that needed to be hidden. The doctor arrived just after 8, not rushed, not uncertain. The kind of presence that came from years of doing the same job under pressure and learning how to carry calm into every room. He introduced himself simply, shook William's hand, nodded to Annie, then moved toward Lena's bed with quiet efficiency. How are we feeling this morning? He asked. Lena gave a faint shrug, like I survived something I didn't sign up for. The doctor smiled slightly. That's accurate. He checked her chart, listened to her breathing, adjusted the monitor with small, practiced movements. Your lungs are still inflamed, he said, but you responded well overnight. That's the important part. Lena glanced at William. He keeps saying that. Because it's true, the doctor replied. A pause. Then, you're not out of this yet, he added, his tone shifting just enough to ground the moment. But you're past the most dangerous point. Annie let out a quiet breath beside the bed. William noticed. He didn't say anything, but he heard it. What happens next? William asked. The doctor turned toward him. We keep her here for observation, he said. IV antibiotics, fluids, respiratory support if needed. After that, recovery depends on consistency. Meaning? William pressed. Meaning she'll need proper care when she leaves, the doctor said. Medication, follow-ups, nutrition, stability. The last word lingered. Not medical, not technical, personal. William nodded once. She'll have it. The doctor studied him briefly, then gave a small, approving nod. I'll hold you to that. He finished his notes, then turned toward Annie. And you, he said gently. You did the right thing bringing her here. Annie looked down slightly. I didn't bring her, she said. I found him. The doctor glanced at William, then back at Annie. Same difference, he said with a faint smile. When he left, the room felt quieter again, but more defined. There were no more unknowns now, just steps, clear, necessary. Lena shifted slightly in the bed, her eyes following the door as it closed. Stability, she repeated softly. William leaned slightly forward. You'll have it. Lena gave him a look, not skeptical, not convinced either. You say things like that easily, she said. I don't say them lightly. A small silence followed. Annie watched both of them again, her gaze moving carefully, as if piecing together something she didn't yet have the words for. Does that mean we don't go back? She asked. The question landed differently, more permanent. William turned to her. You don't have to go back there, he said. Annie blinked. Not at all. No. She looked at Lena. Lena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied William, longer this time, weighing something deeper than just the offer. You understand what you're saying? Lena asked quietly. Yes, this isn't a weekend visit, she continued. This isn't charity. I know. This is responsibility. William held her gaze. I know that too. The room stilled. Annie didn't move, didn't speak. She just waited, because this part mattered, more than anything. Lena exhaled slowly, her strength still limited, but her clarity sharper now. You walked away once, she said. William didn't interrupt. You didn't come back, she added. I know, and now you're here because she found you. William glanced briefly at Annie, then back at Lena. Yes. Another pause. Then, what happens when things get complicated again? Lena asked. The question wasn't loud, but it cut deeper than anything else. William didn't answer right away, because this time, he wasn't going to respond with something easy. I stay, he said finally. Simple, direct, no explanation, no defense. Lena studied him, searching for hesitation, for cracks, for anything that would tell her this was temporary. She didn't find it, not clearly, but enough. Annie shifted slightly closer to the bed. So, we stay with you? She asked, her voice quieter now. William nodded. Yes. Annie looked down at her hands, then back up. Do we have to be quiet there? She asked. The question caught him off guard. Why would you have to be quiet? In some places, you do, she said. William shook his head. No, you don't have to be anything other than yourself. Annie considered that, then gave a small nod. Okay. Lena watched her daughter, then looked back at William. She's not easy, Lena said. William's expression softened slightly. She shouldn't have to be. Lena let out a faint breath. That's not what I meant. I know, he said. Another silence settled, but this one felt different, less guarded, more transitional. Annie climbed carefully back onto the chair beside the bed, her hand finding Lena's again. Can we bring her things? She asked. From the room? William's jaw tightened slightly. That room, that place. No, he said gently. We'll get new things. Annie hesitated. My sweater is there. William looked at her. Then we'll get you a better one. She thought about that, then nodded. Okay. It wasn't about the sweater. It was about what it meant to leave, to not go back. William understood that, more than she realized. A nurse entered again, carrying a small tray. Time for medication, she said softly. Annie moved aside without being asked. William stepped back slightly, giving space, but not distance. As Lena took the medication, her eyes flicked once more toward William. Don't make promises you don't keep, she said quietly. William met her gaze. I'm not. This time, there was no hesitation. The room settled again. Outside, the hospital continued its steady rhythm. Inside, something had shifted, not fully resolved, not complete, but moving. For the first time in years, not away, but forward. The afternoon settled in slowly, stretching the hours into something quieter but no less significant. By midday, the hospital room no longer felt like a place of crisis. The machine still hummed, the IV still dripped with steady precision, but the urgency had softened into something more manageable, something that allowed space for thought. And thought, William realized, was far more dangerous. He stood by the window now, looking down at the city below. People moved in small, distant patterns, cars stopping, starting, lives continuing without interruption. It was strange how normal everything looked from above, as if nothing had changed, but everything had. Behind him, Annie sat cross-legged in the chair, carefully unwrapping a small packet of crackers the nurse had brought earlier. She broke one in half, then paused. Do you want some? She asked. William turned slightly. No, you go ahead. She nodded, then ate quietly, her movements deliberate, unhurried. Across from her, Lena rested against the raised hospital bed, eyes half open, watching them both in that quiet, observant way she had. You don't sit still well, Lena said after a moment. William glanced back at her. I sit still when I need to. You've been standing for 20 minutes. He didn't deny it. Instead, he moved back toward the chair beside Annie and sat down. Better? He asked. Lena gave a faint smile, marginally. Annie looked between them, a small flicker of something lighter crossing her face. Not quite laughter, but close. The room had begun to change, not just physically but in tone. It no longer felt like a place they were visiting. It felt temporary, like something that would lead somewhere else. "So what happens after this?" Annie asked suddenly. William looked at her. "After what?" She gestured slightly around the room. "After she gets better." The question lingered. Lena shifted slightly, her attention sharpening despite her fatigue. William leaned forward, resting his forearms lightly on his knees. "We don't rush that," he said. "First, she gets stronger. And then?" Annie pressed. William paused, then answered carefully. "Then we figure out what comes next. Together." Annie studied him. "Together means all of us?" "Yes." That seemed to matter. A lot. She nodded slowly, absorbing it. Lena watched him closely. "You've changed your language," she said. William glanced at her. "How?" "You used to say things like, 'I'll take care of it,'" she said. "Now it's 'we.'" William considered that. "I think I misunderstood what taking care of something meant," he said. Lena didn't respond right away. "Then, that's one way to put it." A quiet settled again, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was reflective. Annie leaned back in her chair, her feet swinging slightly, now small, unconscious movements that hadn't been there before. She was relaxing, little by little. "Is your house really big?" she asked. William looked at her. "Yes." "How big?" He hesitated. "Then, big enough that you might get lost if you don't know where you're going." Annie's eyes widened slightly. "Really?" "Yes." She thought about that, then smiled faintly. "Then you'll have to show me." William nodded. "I will." Lena watched the exchange, something softer settling into her expression. "You're already planning," she said. "I'm preparing," William corrected. "For what?" William glanced at Annie. "For not making the same mistake twice." That quieted the room again. Lena held his gaze. This time, there was less resistance there. Not gone, but less. A knock sounded lightly on the door before a hospital administrator stepped in, clipboard in hand, posture professional but respectful. "Mr. Carter," she said. "We've finalized the admission and care plan. Everything is in place." William stood. "Good." She glanced briefly at Lena, then Annie, her expression softening just slightly. "If you need anything else, please let us know." "We will," William replied. She nodded and stepped out. Annie watched her leave. "They talk to you differently," she said. William looked down at her. "How so?" "Like, they're careful," she said. "Like they don't want to say the wrong thing." William considered that. "Sometimes people think being careful is the same as being respectful," he said. Annie frowned slightly. "Is it?" "Not always." She nodded, filing that away somewhere. Another small lesson. Another piece of the world being explained in a way she could understand. Lena shifted again, her breathing steady but still shallow. "You should rest too," she said to Annie. "I'm not tired." "You are." Annie hesitated. "Then, maybe a little." William stood again. "I'll find somewhere for you to lie down." Annie looked at him. "You'll stay?" "Yes." "You promise?" William met her eyes. "Yes." That was enough. He stepped out briefly, speaking quietly with a nurse. Minutes later, he returned with a small pillow and a folded blanket. Annie watched him closely as he set them up on the chair, turning it slightly so she could lean more comfortably. "You've done this before," she said. William paused, then shook his head. "No." She tilted her head. "Then how do you know what to do?" William looked at her, then at Lena, then back at Annie. "I'm paying attention," he said. Annie nodded. "That works." She climbed into the chair, curling slightly under the blanket, the pillow tucked beneath her head. Within minutes, her breathing softened. Sleep came easier now, because she wasn't waiting anymore. William stood beside her for a moment longer, then turned back toward Lena. "She trusts you," Lena said quietly. William didn't look away. "I know. That's not something you can afford to break." "I won't." Lena studied him, and for the first time, she believed him just enough to close her eyes without saying anything more. The room settled again. Afternoon light shifted across the floor, and William Carter stood in the middle of it, not as a man who had everything under control, but as someone who had finally chosen to stay. The late afternoon faded into evening almost without notice. The light in the room shifted from soft gold to a muted gray, shadows stretching longer across the floor, settling into the corners like quiet witnesses. The hospital, which had hummed steadily all day, seemed to slow just slightly, as if even it needed a moment to breathe. Annie was still asleep, curled gently in the chair, the blanket tucked beneath her chin, one small hand resting loosely against her cheek. Her breathing was even now, unguarded in a way it hadn't been before. She wasn't listening for danger anymore. She wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. She was just sleeping. William stood nearby, watching her for a moment longer than necessary. There was something unfamiliar about it. Not the act of watching, but the reason. He wasn't observing. He was making sure. That was new. Behind him, Lena shifted slightly in the bed. "You're staring," she murmured, her voice quiet but awake. William turned. "She hasn't moved in a while. She's sleeping," Lena replied. "I know." Lena studied him for a moment, her eyes clearer now than they had been that morning. "You didn't know what that looked like before," she said. It wasn't a question. William didn't deny it. "No," he said. Lena gave a faint nod. "That makes sense." A small silence followed, not uncomfortable, just honest. William moved back toward the chair beside her bed and sat down, this time without hesitation. Without needing to be told, Lena watched him settle. "You stayed all day," she said. "Yes. No calls, no rushing out, no one interrupting you. I told them not to." Lena raised an eyebrow slightly. "You can do that?" William almost smiled. "Yes." She let out a quiet breath. "Must be nice." He didn't answer right away, because he understood what she meant. Not just about control, about choice. The kind of choice she hadn't had in a long time. "Lena," he said after a moment. She looked at him. "I should have done more," he said. The words didn't come easily. They weren't polished. They weren't framed in the way he usually spoke. They were direct, and that made them heavier. Lena didn't respond immediately. She looked at him carefully, measuring not just the words but the man saying them. "You should have," she said. No softness, no cushioning, just truth. William nodded once. "I know." Another pause. Then Lena shifted slightly, adjusting her position with effort. "You came once," she said. "You saw how we were living." William's gaze dropped briefly. "I didn't understand what I was seeing." "You didn't want to," she corrected. That landed, and stayed. William didn't argue. "I told myself it wasn't my place," he said. Lena let out a faint breath. "That's the thing about family," she said quietly. "It doesn't wait for you to decide if it's your place." The room stilled. Annie shifted slightly in her sleep, her hand tightening briefly around the blanket before relaxing again. William glanced at her, then back at Lena. "I'm here now," he said. Lena held his gaze. "For how long?" she asked. William didn't hesitate this time. "As long as it takes." Lena watched him closely, looking for hesitation, for doubt, for anything that would suggest this was temporary. She didn't find it. Not clearly. Not enough to dismiss it. "Annie believes you," she said. "I know. She doesn't get that wrong often." William nodded. "I won't make her wrong this time." That was the first time something in Lena's expression softened without resistance. Not fully, but enough. "You're going to have to learn fast," she said. "I am. She's not like you." "I know. She notices everything." William glanced toward Annie again. "I've started to see that." Lena's lips curved faintly. "She'll test you." William almost smiled. "She already has." That earned a quiet breath of something close to a laugh. It didn't last long, but it mattered. The room settled again. Evening now fully in place. Lights dimmed slightly. The world outside reduced to distant shapes and faint reflections. After a while, Annie stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking against the softer light. For a second, she looked confused. Then, she saw them, both of them, in the same place, still there. "You're still here," she murmured. William leaned slightly forward. "Yes." Lena gave a faint smile. "Where else would we be?" Annie pushed herself upright, the blanket slipping slightly as she sat up straighter. "I didn't miss anything?" she asked. "No," William said. "Nothing important." Annie looked between them. Something had changed. She could feel it, even if she didn't have the words yet. "You talked?" she said. Lena nodded. "We did." "About what?" Lena glanced at William, then back at Annie. "About staying." Annie's eyes widened slightly. "Staying together?" William met her gaze. "Yes." The word settled gently, but firmly. Annie looked down at her hands for a moment, then back up. "Okay," she said. No hesitation, no fear, just acceptance. Because this time, She believed it, and William knew that belief was something he couldn't afford to lose. Not again. Morning returned again, but this time, it didn't feel uncertain. It felt earned. Soft light filtered through the hospital blinds, stretching across the room in long, quiet lines. The machine still hummed. The IV still ticked steadily beside Lena's bed. But something fundamental had changed. Nothing here felt temporary anymore. Annie was already awake. She sat near the window now, knees pulled close to her chest, watching the world outside with a kind of stillness that didn't come from fear but from thought. William noticed it immediately. "You're quiet," he said. Annie didn't turn right away. "I'm thinking," she replied. "That can be dangerous," he said lightly. She glanced back at him. "I know." That almost made him smile. Lena stirred slightly in the bed, her breathing steady, her strength returning in small, measurable ways. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Annie hesitated, then answered honestly. "What happens when we leave here?" The question settled into the room, not heavy, but important. William stepped closer, resting one hand lightly on the back of the chair near her. "We leave together," he said. Annie nodded. "But then what?" William didn't answer immediately, because this time, the answer mattered. Not just what he said, but what he meant. "We go somewhere safe," he said finally. "Somewhere stable." Annie looked at him. "Your house?" "Yes." She considered that. Then, "Will it feel like this?" she asked. William frowned slightly. "Like what?" "Like, people stay," she said. The question landed deeper than anything else she had asked so far. Lena watched him carefully, waiting, not for the answer, for the truth. William took a breath, then stepped closer fully into the space between both of them. "It will," he said. No hesitation, no distance. Annie studied his face, the way children do when they are deciding whether to believe something that matters. Then she nodded. Okay, that was it. No more questions. Because for her, that was enough. A doctor entered shortly after, reviewing Lena's chart with a quiet sense of progress. "You're improving faster than expected," he said. "If everything continues like this, we can start planning discharge within a few days." Lena raised an eyebrow slightly. "Already? Recovery doesn't stop when you leave," the doctor replied. "It just changes location." William nodded. "We'll be ready." The doctor glanced at him. "I'm counting on that." He turned to Annie. "You'll have a job too," he said gently. Annie blinked. "I will. Make sure she follows instructions," he said. Annie nodded seriously. "I can do that." The doctor smiled faintly and left. The room settled again. But now, there was direction, a path forward. Lena shifted slightly, her gaze moving between William and Annie. "You really thought this through," she said. William shook his head. "I'm still learning. That's new." "I know." Annie slid off the chair and walked over to the bed, resting her chin lightly against the mattress. "Are we going to bring our stuff?" she asked. William looked at her. "No." Annie hesitated. "Not even my sweater?" William knelt slightly so he was at her level. "We're not going back to that place," he said gently. "We're starting somewhere new." Annie looked down for a moment, then back up. "Will I get new things?" "Yes." "All of them?" "Yes." She thought about that, then nodded. "Okay." It wasn't about the things. It was about what they meant. Lena watched them both, something quiet and unresolved finally settling into something closer to acceptance. "You're really doing this," she said to William. "Yes." "No halfway?" "No." She held his gaze. "Then, good." That was the closest thing to trust she had given him, and it was enough. Annie climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed again, this time without hesitation, her hand slipping into Lena's. Then, after a second, she reached for William's hand too, pulling both of them together. Not perfectly, not easily, but intentionally. William looked down at her small hand connecting them, then at Lena, then back at Annie, and for the first time, he understood something clearly. This wasn't about fixing the past. It wasn't about making up for what he had missed. It was about what he chose now. Every day, every moment. Annie looked up at him. "Do you remember me now?" she asked softly. The question was different this time. Not testing, not fragile, just real. William felt something tighten in his chest. Not pain. Something deeper. Something that stayed. He knelt fully now, bringing himself level with her, his voice steady but quieter than before. "I remember what I should have seen," he said. Annie watched him. "And now?" she asked. William gently squeezed her hand. Now I remember everything that matters. Annie smiled. Not wide, not dramatic, just enough, and that was more than anything else. Outside, the light had fully settled into the day. Inside, nothing was perfect. Nothing was finished. But something had begun. Not because the past had been repaired, but because they had chosen not to look away anymore. This story reminds us that sometimes the greatest failures in life are not caused by cruelty, but by quiet neglect. The moments we choose not to look closer, not to ask one more question, not to return when we should. It teaches that being too busy can become a form of abandonment, especially to those who depend on us the most. Yet, it also offers hope. It is never too late to show up, to take responsibility, and to choose love over distance. True family is not defined by perfection or timing, but by the courage to stay, to care, and to never turn away again once we finally see what truly matters. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.